Over the last year, detailed research on the users of the intermediate market in Westminster has brought to light 5 key user groups, each with distinct characteristics. Over the autumn, further qualitative investigation has provided an additional level of understanding of current living arrangements, employment, and the aspirations around residential property for the users of the Westminster market. The focus group sessions investigated further and drew out insight from the individual experiences of the users of the Westminster market. We were able to gauge the taste and preferences on a personal level. Over September and October 2011, users of the Westminster housing market were invited to take part in a series of focus groups. The participants were split into groups based on defined user profiles. Minor marsupials, typically younger users of the market in Westminster with relatively low levels of affordability, looking to leave the family home for the first time. They are prepared to rent in either a studio or one-bedroom unit, and a significant proportion work in government or the public sector. Sociable sharers, a young user group living in shared accommodation, focused on their careers with fairly strong levels of affordability. This group is the least likely to have children in the near future. Solitary savers, single people who are undecided about their future plans with regard to family and career. They primarily live in the private rented sector. This group was the oldest of all the profile groups, primarily interested in one-bedroom units. Committed couples. This group of young couples have the largest level of disposable income and are the most likely to have children in the next 2 to 5 years. Most couples want to own as their housing preference. Inflating families. The families group is an older group in the profile groups. They have dependent family members varying from preschool age to postgraduate age. There is a significant representation of public sector workers, and they are interested in 2 or 3 bedroom properties in Westminster. All of the groups followed the same format. Firstly, discussion around the impact of career on housing situation, and secondly, a discussion around life plan and housing ambition. The Minor Marsupials session brought to light some key points of insight about the preferences and concerns of users in this segment of the market. Uncertainty around employment security, particularly in the public sector, had a drastic effect on people's decisions around housing and mobility.
We all are having similar issues with stability issues at work, i.e. it isn't very stable. One of us has come through a restructure, one is facing potential cutbacks, in fact 2 others are facing potential cutbacks, potential redundancy, they just don't know what's going on yet. And all of that kind of instability in terms of potential employment aside, we're also faced with the fact that yes, we'd all like to move out, but we simply don't earn enough to move into sort of the locations that perhaps we're looking at.
The Minor Marsupials group suggested that they would consider renting as a long-term housing option. This product would have to provide a satisfactory level of security through greater tenancy length and periodic tenancy reviews.
Okay. I mean, for me, renting is more of a priority than actually buying. Plus, I actually think, if I'm going to be honest, I don't think shared ownership is, I actually think it's quite expensive.
It was interesting that some users in this group were not leaving the nest for the first time. Circumstances such as a separation or family breakdown had meant that they have had to re-enter this user group at an older age. They are no longer looking to buy and just want to find a secure way to rent on a long-term basis.
Both of us felt that we didn't necessarily want to buy. It wasn't our priority. We wanted an affordable place to, affordable rent.
So an intermediate product.
Yeah. From my perspective, I'm mature. One of the oldest in the group. I've had a house, divorced, lost my house in my divorce. At my stage in life, there's no way I want to buy again. I'll be like 60 before I can afford the deposit. So I just want to rent somewhere affordable.
There were mixed attitudes from the sociable sharers group to continued sharing, largely motivated by the time spent in shared accommodation. The focus group session delivered some key lessons around how improvements are needed in shared accommodation and the aspirations of sharers long term. Some users within this group fed back points about the negative effect of long-term sharing on health and well-being.
Basically, when you have been sharing for like 8 years and you live with strangers and everybody wants to have to be respected by the other tenants, but the only thing is everybody has his own habits, and at some point either you get along with people or you don't. And I found out that basically it's very stressful to live with people you don't know, and you get home and you want to just want to relax, and unfortunately it's not.
Feedback from participants was clear that information about intermediate housing products was poor. The lack of information has left a feeling of distrust amongst some users in the market.
It was very difficult to get your head around everything. I think you need to invest a lot of time into understanding the various contracts and the nuances about the various housing associations and what the actual full package is. For example, with the private equity schemes, they're almost useless within central London because I think the limit is 280,000. Shared ownership can often look very good depending on the specific contractual obligations that you have within that agreement. Some of those that I found quite off-putting with an inability to do something if you got into a crisis situation. So I found that was quite a scary contract to get into.
Sharers felt that they would be very receptive to being involved in the selection of new tenants when a vacancy occurred.
I think sort of the two people sharing who are strangers thing works better when there's a little bit more control over who you. So even if you don't know that person, at least you have a choice in who that other person is.
You could have like the lead tenant, which you suggested, whereby somebody has that, and then they get that property on the agreement that 10 months out of 12 they're going to have somebody else in there. I think just randomly putting somebody else in there isn't going to work. And if you just give this to couples or single people, you're going to under-occupy this property. And I think it's sacrilege really if you've got a 2-bedroom property and one person's taking one room, the other one's free. It's grossly unfair.
It was clear from feedback from this group that there is an age threshold to continued sharing. Users within their 20s were happy to continue to share.
I was sharing a house for 15 years. I think you reach a psychological threshold where even though I was sharing with friends, you just can't take any more. People were coming and collapsing in the bathroom at 2:30 drunk. It's just no longer fun. And you reach a threshold when you're 29, you have too much responsibility at work and you can't go in the next morning having had 4 hours sleep.
And do you think that is an age threshold?
I think
that's the crucial thing?
I guess to start with, well, people in their 20s, they can share. But then there is some point that, they will go off, they will kind of buy a flat somewhere, they'll get married or whatever. So you can't rely on the sharing with the people that you're sharing with.
And you want your own privacy at some point, which you can't get when you share.
It's part of the London experience in 20s to share a house. It's character building, but my character's built now.
Exactly.
I just don't want to share a house anymore with anybody else.
The Solitary Savers Group had a number of attendees already using intermediate housing. As such, it brought out a number of interesting considerations to help accommodate users from this profile group. Across the focus groups, proximity to employment featured as a key point of consensus. A short commuting time meant greater quality of life, the ability to live in the community you work in, and less pressure tied to careers. Location superseded other priorities such as cost, size, and design for the large majority of focus group participants.
As a teacher, I want to live in the community that I work in. A lot of the kids that I work with live nearby, and it would be a bit strange to having lived there for 5 years to then have to move out and travel, and I don't really like travel.
I mean, for me, you were talking about location versus cost. I chose the other thing for me was important, the location, because as I was explaining, I'd rather sacrifice other things and be able to walk. When I take into account the extra hour a day that I save on commuting, that's 10 hours a week. To me, that's a cost.
There was a consensus that users in this group would make use of the intermediate rent product as a stepping stone to ownership, provided that there was a level of security and that their tenancy facilitated meaningful savings.
The intermediate rent tenancies need to be longer. Definitely.
How long?
10 years. Because 5 years at the moment is not realistic.
But I'm like you, it's time limited. I don't know how and
what we're supposed to do at the end of the time.
I think the point is to save a deposit in the 5 years time. I don't know that I could save something, but to buy again in Westminster would be quite difficult.
The committed couples group have the largest disposable income of all of the profile groups, yet feedback suggests they still struggle to achieve their property and tenure ambitions. The session provided useful insight around the importance of location, affordability, and property type. Keeping commuting time down was an important point for our committed couples. It was essential for them to maintain a quality of life while sustaining a high level of income.
You know, if the landlord decides to sell up and we have to move on, I'm not even sure if we can afford to live where we are now, and that would massively affect it. You know, would I want to stay here if I have to travel? I mean, even 50 minutes is there and back is quite a bit. So, I mean, it would definitely affect it if I had to travel a bit more. Yeah, absolutely.
Ownership was the ultimate goal within this group. Most, however, are unable to do so due to current deposit requirements and as such continue to rent.
Yeah, I'll be disappointed if we didn't own something in 5 years.
They're talking about shared ownership, aren't you?
The other problem with that question, when I say ownership, I mean some form of ownership. Any kind of ownership where you're paying money that you don't.
As opposed to being regarded as somebody in the short term who needs to work in London, in Westminster, get a discounted rent, which is purely rental.
Yeah.
2 to 5 years, so that you can save that difference.
Yeah, I mean, possibly.
I mean, I'm just sort of trying to sort of...
Well, I don't think those opportunities are out there.
If it was, like,
Yeah.
our renters are allowed to that.
This group is the most likely to have children in the next 2 to 5 years. As such, space and property type were key when deciding on accommodation.
A safe area and just a house that you can make your own. Really, it doesn't have to be huge. Just just a safe area. And I think ideally we were talking about maybe not having like living in a block with when you have kids, but I think we might go for it. I don't know if it's there, if that's the option then. But still, yeah, I think a safe area and maybe more like a house than a block.
The Inflating Families group was perhaps the most revealing of all of the 5 focus groups. The primary learning point was that dependent family members were not just preschool-aged children, but actually ages ranging as old as the mid-20s. This group relied most upon support networks, and location security was important to them to guarantee safety and good schooling. Space and bedroom numbers were also key for this group. Having a robust support network is a large factor in enabling many of the inflating families to stay in their current accommodation. Support networks were not only other family members, but also found through neighbours. Having a supportive community was important.
When my child was about 1.5, I was made homeless with a 1.5-year-old child, and I was working full time. So in the interim, I've established a whole community support. Like right now, I just dropped them off at a friend's house, right. Which if I move somewhere else, I won't have that support, right? And that's essential for me, being a single mom especially.
Yep.
And my son is 26 years old, and he doesn't seem to want to go anywhere. For him, I would rather he stay there because we've lived there. Well, he's been there since he was little, and everybody knows him, and he knows everybody in the neighborhood.
So quite a big sense of community.
Yes, we've always moved around, in the same block.
Right.
So everybody knows him, and I'll feel better if he stayed there, because being an only child as well, he has lots of friends there.
Many of the Inflating Families participants felt that the Westminster Borough delivered excellent schooling and a good level of security. As such, location is very important to them.
The other thing about Westminster, I really think, well, I want to live here, is also because of the police force. In Westminster, it's so secure that the police do, they're outside the schools, and they have little community groups for the kids to go to. And they actually know the children by face and name, or the mothers. And you go past, they will sort of say something like, "Saw your son."
So secure neighbourhood is something that's
very important. And it's really nice because it's very secure.
And the school is important. I rather stuck in one little room and make sure my kids are getting the best education with the best behavior to achieve. And me stacking in one single room, that's fine by me.
When considering property type, size and the number of bedrooms had a huge impact. Many people in this group associated space with the well-being of their children.
But everybody's telling us we need a garden. It's just not possible in central London, so space would be a major consideration for the location where we'll be staying in the future.
So, for me, now's the time to look for a bigger place. And I think space is very important for a baby as well. You know, I don't like crowded places.
There was a clear order of priority across the users of the Westminster market. This order drives their decision-making process. Security, followed by location, then cost, size and design. It is clear that the market for intermediate housing in Westminster is a diverse one, and the existing product mix does not cater for all. Providers of intermediate housing have an opportunity for real innovation in Westminster. Whether it be through product development or adjustment to eligibility criteria, there is a gap in the current intermediate market. Minor marsupials would benefit from a modern approach to tenancy management. Longer tenancy length would deliver an attractive level of security, and many in this user group were in favour of a periodic tenancy review with the view to progress up the ladder. Sociable sharers willing to continue sharing were from the younger end of this user group. They would also benefit from an intermediate rented product that enabled them to continue saving whilst being centrally located and thus closer to work. They also spoke very favourably about the prospect of a consultative approach to selecting new tenants in a shared unit. Solitary savers use the intermediate market as a temporary stage before ideally progressing to ownership. They would benefit from a longer form of intermediate rent to facilitate their saving of a deposit. This is broadly the same for the committed couples group, who are keen to achieve ownership in the next 2 to 5 years. Proximity to employment and larger bedroom sizes are important to this group. The Inflating Families group valued space for their family development, but most want to stay centrally located to access Westminster schooling and enjoy Westminster security. It may not be possible to design a product that caters for all the users of the Westminster market, and as such, providers may have to appraise which segment of the market they want to target. There is also the opportunity to appraise each development as it arises, determining which user group of the market it is best suited to. This approach over time would offer holistic coverage to all the users of the Westminster housing market.